those still trapped scrambler to save themselves. Just tens of minutes earlier, the place had been buzzing with the everyday rhythm of learning. Now, the school had morphed into a scene of chaotic evacuation and pure terror. Hey everyone, before we dive into the video, we want to announce that we're launching a brand new segment called Trace Your Story. For this segment, you can send us a real-life story you've experienced, from horror and cheating to crime or any other true story you have. Send us your story at seanvirelltraceyourstory@gmail.com using this format. Email subject: Trace Your Story. Story title: Your Title Here. Tell us your experience in as much detail as possible. Feel free to include any supporting photos or evidence if you have them. Optional contact: your WhatsApp number or another way we can reach you for more information. Don't worry, you can absolutely send your story anonymously if you prefer. We'll do our best to create a video and tell your experience. I'm really looking forward to your emails, and who knows, your story might be the very first one featured on Trace Your Story. Don't forget to submit your stories. I'll be waiting and can't wait to read them. Before we tear this all down piece by piece, if you want to support Trace Zero so we can keep bringing you deeper, long-form investigations, consider joining Trace Circle. You'll get exclusive stickers featuring my face to use in the live chats and comment sections. I'll see you there. By the way, for those of you wanting to grab some official Tracers merch, everything is live right now. We've got hoodies, tank tops, mugs, tumblers, phone cases, and a whole lot more. You can check it out by clicking the link below. It's fully integrated right here into the video. Hey Tracers, welcome back to the channel. This is the place where we dive into real true crime cases from all around the globe. I hope all of you watching right now are staying safe, healthy, and out of harm's way. On the 7th of August, 2026, a tragic school shooting broke out in Nonthaburi, Thailand. Within minutes, what started as a quiet morning of classes spiraled into absolute pandemonium. Several students and teachers fell victim to the rampage. But as it turned out, this shooting was allegedly tied to another horrifying event the shooter had set into motion just moments before. What exactly happened, and what drove the shooter to do all of this? Let's unpack it together, because you never know how deep this hole goes. It was Friday morning, the 7th of August, 2026. A 14-year-old student named Patkata Yimruang woke up just like he would on any other day. But that morning was different. Before putting on his school uniform, Patkata didn't head straight to the dining table. Instead, he slipped into his grandparents' bedroom. His grandfather was Somjit Yimruang, and his grandmother was Portip Yimruang. The room was empty. Patkata began searching for his grandfather's CZ-75 compact pistol. Somehow, he knew exactly where it was hidden, stashed in the closet beneath a pile of clothes. At that moment, Somjit was out in the kitchen preparing breakfast. With Portip in the bathroom, Patkata seized his window of opportunity. Once he grabbed the pistol, he also took a supply of ammunition. He loaded a few rounds straight into the gun and racked the slide. The rest of the ammo went into his bedroom, packed neatly inside his school bag. A few minutes later, Patkata stepped out of his room, gun already in hand. The first person he went after was his grandfather in the kitchen. Patkata crept quietly so as not to draw attention. He took his position and fired 2 rounds straight at Somjit. Somjit collapsed instantly onto the floor. Patkata then turned and moved toward his grandmother. He knew the gunshots had likely alerted Portip, but by then, Portip had already walked back into her bedroom. The moment he swung the door open, Patkata brutally attacked his grandmother while she was still on the bed. The shot struck her head, splattering blood across the mattress. In a matter of seconds, Patkata had executed the very people who had raised him. There is no record of whether the neighbors heard the shots or not. What we do know for sure is that Patkata didn't stop there. He walked back to his room, finally put on his school uniform, and calmly walked out the door, leaving the lifeless bodies of his grandparents behind. Patkata's destination that morning was school. He was a student at Debsirin Nonthaburi School, located about 18 kilometers from his house. That morning, he commuted by bus. On board, Pat Kata looked just like any other student heading to class. By around 9 a.m., school activities were running smoothly. For context, the school was a combined middle and high school housing, thousands of students, and over 100 teachers. Academic data from 2025 showed an enrollment of around 3,100 students and a staff of 147 teachers. On that day, the classrooms were filled with the usual buzz of learning. Teachers were lecturing, and students were going through their daily schedules. Pat Kata was already on campus, wearing the standard purple uniform just like everybody else. His first class ran from 8:30 to 9:15 a.m. on the 6th floor. Once the first period ended, the second period carried on until 10 a.m. Up until then, Pat Kata sat through class quietly. But right at 10 a.m., as the period transitioned, everything shattered. Pat Kata unzipped his school bag. He pulled out the handgun he had brought from home and concealed it under his uniform. Then, he stepped out of the classroom. Pat Kata walked down the relatively quiet 6th floor hallway. A few students were still hanging around outside their classes. Seconds later, he drew the pistol from beneath his shirt and racked the slide once more. Pat Kata began brandishing the gun to terrorize anyone in sight before patrolling the hallway to look for his targets. It's believed his primary targets were a specific teacher and a group of students. But as luck would have it, those targets weren't on the 6th floor that morning. Frustrated and bitter, Pat Kata continued roaming the hallway until he spotted a few other students standing outside a classroom. Pat Kata approached them and opened fire at random. What was a peaceful school day seconds ago instantly devolved into absolute chaos. Students in the hallway scrambled frantically to save their lives. Some sprinted into classrooms, slamming the doors shut behind them, while others ducked under desks for cover. As Pat Kata paced down the hallway, he opened fire on anyone who crossed his path. In the middle of the panic, Pat Kata even paused in front of one classroom to check his remaining ammo. Seeing him reload sent those hiding inside into an even deeper state of terror. Afterwards, Pat Kata kept moving. This time, he headed toward the counseling office. Once inside, he opened fire on several teachers, killing a guidance counselor named Tiwa Ponwanik. He then ran into the staff room, firing wildly at anyone in his line of sight, taking the lives of Nonkanapan Nakplong, a language teacher, and Prapan Kansila, a math teacher. As he exited the staff room, Pat Kata ran straight into the vice principal, Kitipan Somran. Kitipan was shocked to see Pat Kata holding a gun. He tried talking to him, attempting to calm the boy down and assure him that whatever problem he was facing could be worked out. But Pat Kata didn't care. He fired another round. Kitipan managed to dodge it and took off running. Pat Kata gave chase and fired again. This time, the bullet hit Kitipan, killing him instantly. The nightmare at the school was far from over. From a distance, Pat Kata spotted a staff member guiding students and teachers down the stairs to evacuate. Pat Kata closed in on the crowd. Students and teachers scattered in sheer terror to escape. Amidst the chaos and incoming gunfire, a school secretary named Saifan was hit and killed. Meanwhile, the uncertainty of Pat Kata's whereabouts made the air even more suffocating. Students huddled in classrooms had no idea if the shooter was right outside their door or in another part of the building. Word of Pat Kata's whereabouts began spreading through student WhatsApp groups as kids warned one another to stay clear. For them, the sole objective was surviving and finding a way out without running into the shooter. A female student named Kim was inside the building when the shooting erupted. She later shared that as the gunshots grew louder and closer, she and her classmates felt like they weren't going to make it out alive. They stayed low to the ground, backed as far away from the doors as possible, and took shelter. One of Kim's family members happened to be in a different building. Because of that, phone calls and text messages became their only lifeline to check if they were still safe. Elsewhere, the scene inside the school was growing increasingly chaotic. Some students tried to escape the building as fast as their legs could carry them, some running barefoot, others scrambling for cover or following teachers' directions to clear the danger zone. In the panic, several students suffered injuries while trying to escape. Shortly after the emergency calls poured in, police forces and special units rushed to the scene. Officers moved into the school grounds to secure the students while actively hunting for the shooter. At that point, however, many students were still barricaded in classrooms, completely unaware of whether the threat had been neutralized. With Pat Kada's exact location still unconfirmed, the evacuation had to be executed with extreme caution. Police split into tactical teams. Some handled the evacuation of students and staff, while others swept the floors to hunt down and stop the shooter. The search team made their way up the stairwell toward the 6th floor, guided by intel from students who had reported his last known location. Finally, police cornered Pat Kada at the far end of the corridor. Pat Kada stood completely silent, staring right back at them. Moments later, Pat Kada raised the gun to his temple and took his own life before officers could reach him. First responders rushed to try and save Pat Kada, calling for emergency medical help. When medics checked his pulse, it was faint, but still there. They performed CPR in a desperate attempt to revive him, but it was too late. Pat Kada was pronounced dead at the scene. With Pat Kada's death, the trail of violence that began at his home and spilled into the school came to a sudden halt. But for the people inside the school that morning, the nightmare didn't just end there. Those who were still trapped scrambled to safety. Just tens of minutes earlier, the place had been buzzing with learning. Now, it had transformed into a harrowing scene of evacuation and panic. Once the area was finally secured, the true scale of the tragedy became glaringly clear. 5 people were dead inside the school. Dozens of students and staff members were wounded, with several in critical condition. Shortly after the school rampage ended, police received a call from a local Nonthaburi resident reporting a shooting at a residence. Upon investigation, the victims were confirmed to be Pat Kada's grandparents. A day after the attack, a 12-year-old female student who had been clinging to life in critical condition succumbed to her injuries at the hospital. Her passing brought the total death toll of the entire tragedy to 9 people, including Pat Kada himself, with 30 others injured by gunfire or hurt during the frantic escape. Yet despite all the answers gathered, one massive question hung heavy in the air. How could a 14-year-old boy do all of this? Pat Kada's death didn't bring the investigation to a close. If anything, it forced the police to dig even deeper. Because the one person who knew the true reason behind the bloodshed was gone, investigators had no choice but to painstakingly piece together the timeline from the evidence left behind. They relied heavily on statements from those who interacted with Pat Kada before and during the shooting. To build the case, police interviewed 16 people, including teachers, students, neighbors, and relatives. By cross-referencing their accounts, investigators mapped out how the attack began, where Pat Kada moved, and how the spree ultimately ended. A crucial piece of information came from one of Pat Kada's classmates, who revealed that before the shooting started, Pat Kada had been searching specifically for a teacher and a few students. Based on that statement, police concluded those individuals were likely his primary targets. But when Pat Kada couldn't find them where he expected, he snapped and decided to open fire on anyone in his path. To truly grasp how this nightmare took root, police couldn't just look at what Pat Kada did on that fateful Friday morning. They had to dig deeper into who this teenager actually was before everything spiraled out of control. Pat Kada Yumruang was born into a fractured family. When he was still very young, his parents went through a divorce, a split that fundamentally reshaped Pat Kada's life. After his parents went their separate ways, the responsibility of raising Pat Kada fell entirely on his grandparents. From then on, their home in the Bangbuathong district of Nonthaburi became Pat Kada's world. It was where he spent the vast majority of his childhood. His grandparents didn't just provide for his basic needs. They were his primary caregivers, standing by his side as he grew from a young child into a teenager. On the surface, Pat Kada was far from neglected. His grandparents showered him with care, kept him well provided for financially, made sure he got a good education, and did everything in their power to give him a comfortable life. But there was a defining trait that had lingered within Pat Kada for a long time. He was known to be exceptionally quiet and withdrawn. Pat Kada spent most of his time locked in his own world, rarely opening up to anyone. When he transitioned into high school, Pat Kada enrolled at Debsirin Nonthaburi School, a prestigious and highly competitive institution. Generally, only students with stellar academic records made the cut. At school, Pat Kada went through the motions like any regular student, attending lectures and turning in assignments. but internally, he held himself to brutally high academic standards. To him, getting good grades, perfection, if possible, was his way of repaying his grandparents. Because of this self-imposed pressure, any outcome that fell short of his expectations became a crushing weight. Outside of regular school hours, he was also enrolled in private tutoring classes. That relentless schedule left Pat Kata with almost no breathing room to just rest and reset. One day, his grandmother bought Pat Kata a computer. It was meant to assist him with his studies and give him digital access to educational resources. But once he had the computer in his room, Pat Kata began using it to play violent video games instead. Over time, gaming became an obsession. On paper, Pat Kata was actually an academically gifted student, but behind closed doors, he spent more and more late nights secretly playing games without his grandparents ever knowing. The unresolved issues simmering beneath his routine slowly forged an emotional state far more complex than anyone on the outside could have guessed. To understand what ultimately triggered Pat Kata, we have to look at the final days leading up to the tragedy. In early August 2026, Pat Kata's life still seemed to be following its normal track. But anxiety started consuming his thoughts when the results for a Thai language test were handed back. Pat Kata was terrified because he hadn't prepared for the exam at all. Instead, he had reportedly stayed up late into the night playing video games. When the teacher called his name, Pat Kata's face visibly tensed up. He stood up from his seat and walked to the front of the class. The teacher handed him the test paper while offering a piece of advice to study harder next time. To make matters worse, his test score was announced out loud in front of his peers. Pat Kata stood frozen. He stared down at the paper in his hands, which bore a single, soul-crushing digit, a 0. Pat Kata didn't even dare lift his head to look at his classmates. In his mind, they were either shocked, pitying him, or secretly laughing at his failure. At that moment, only one thought dominated his mind. How was he going to go home without his grandparents finding out? He knew his grandmother would inevitably ask about the test results. That evening, Pat Kata deliberately delayed coming home. He wasn't hanging out with friends. He just needed time to mentally prepare himself to face his grandparents. According to a relative's statement, when Pat Kata finally walked through the door, his grandfather questioned him with a stern tone. He had been worried about why Pat Kata was so late. His grandfather asked where he had been and why it took him so long to get back. Pat Kata merely offered a weak smile, claiming he took a longer, circuitous route home. Suspecting nothing unusual, his grandfather believed the story and told Pat Kata to go wash up before dinner. His grandmother was in the kitchen cooking. Pat Kata excused himself from dinner altogether, claiming he was still full. In reality, he was starving. As the night wore on, Pat Kata could no longer ignore his hunger pangs. He slipped out of his room, only to be caught off guard when he saw that his grandparents were still awake. They were sitting in the living room watching television. Pat Kata headed into the kitchen, grabbed some food, and ate at the dining table. Just as he finished his meal, he heard footsteps approaching. His grandmother walked in and directly asked about the Thai language test results that were handed back that day. Pat Kata froze on the spot. He apologized, confessing that he felt like he had failed her. His grandmother sighed and asked him to fetch the test paper. Pat Kata went back to his room to retrieve it. When he handed it over, he saw the raw disappointment painted across his grandmother's face. She let out a heavy sigh and asked how he could have gotten such a low mark. Pat Kata just kept his head down and shook it in silence. His grandfather then patted him on the shoulder, telling him to study harder next time and take the bad grade as a learning experience. Even so, Pat Kata couldn't stop staring at that test paper. Flash forward to Thursday, the 6th of August, 2026, just one day before the massacre. During lunch break, Pat Kata was walking toward the school cafeteria. From a distance, he noticed a group of students gathered near the sports field. The moment they locked eyes on Pat Kata, they burst into laughter. Pat Kata initially tried to ignore them and kept walking toward the cafeteria, but one of the students stepped in to block his path. They began taunting him about the 0 he had just received on his test, mercilessly mocking his intelligence. Pat Kata pleaded with them to stop, but witnesses noted that the torment only escalated. One of the bullies sneered, that a student with grades that pathetic belonged in a special needs class. They then forced Pat Kata into the restroom, opened a stall, and shoved him inside. Afterwards, they locked Pat Kata in the stall from the outside. The bullies walked away, leaving the key hanging in the lock. Pat Kata remained trapped inside until the end of the school day was near. Finally, another student walked into the restroom and noticed the key left in the door. Pat Kata, hearing someone inside, cried out for help, and the student unlocked the stall to set him free. Pat Kata stormed out of the restroom, consumed by a mountain of pent-up rage. He hurried back to his classroom only to find it completely deserted, with his school bag left behind. Pat Kata grabbed his bag and walked straight to the bus stop to head home. Later that same day, Pat Kata arrived at an empty house. His grandparents weren't home. He walked into his room and sat there, lost in a trance, as the dark feelings he had bottled up for so long completely overwhelmed him. It was then that he allegedly began plotting how to exact revenge on the people he felt had pushed him over the edge. That night, Pat Kata turned on his computer and began researching school shootings from around the world. He wanted to see how past shooters prepared themselves and how they executed their attacks. No one truly knows what was going through Pat Kata's mind that night. But the following morning, on the 7th of August, 2026, everything changed. A morning that should have been just another ordinary Friday turned out to be the genesis of a horrific tragedy. And just a few hours later, Debsirin Nonthaburi school transformed from a place of learning into a nightmare of gunfire and terror. A chain reaction that sparked from a test score of 0, unbearable pressure, and relentless bullying ultimately escalated into a catastrophe no one ever saw coming. 9 lives were cut short, including Pat Kata's, and 30 others were left wounded. For the families of the victims, perhaps the hardest part is trying to pick up the pieces and pretend to live a normal life again. The school will eventually fill with students once more, classrooms will be reoccupied, and lesson plans will resume. But for those who were inside the building that morning, the exact same hallways will likely never feel the same again. A nightmare that lasted only minutes has left wounds, trauma, and lingering questions that will endure for a lifetime. This case serves as a stark reminder that massive tragedies don't always stem from one singular dramatic event. Sometimes it all starts with something that appears trivial: mounting pressure, unspoken feelings, bullying passed off as harmless banter, and a quiet teenager slowly choosing to swallow it all alone. But on the flip side, there are equally critical questions we must ask. How was a firearm kept in a home in a way that made it so easily accessible to a teenager? How can school environments better spot the warning signs in a struggling student before things cross the point of no return? And how can the adults around a child be truly present when that child starts drowning in silence? Because at the end of the day, this tragedy isn't just about what happened on August 7th, it's about all the days leading up to it. The days when there was still a chance to notice that someone was breaking down, a chance to ask, a chance to listen. And perhaps the best form of prevention isn't about what we do after the dust settles, but how quickly we realize that someone is reaching out for help before that window closes forever. To the victims of this terrible tragedy, may they rest in peace. And to their grieving families, I send my deepest condolences and hope you find the strength to carry on. What are your thoughts on this case, tracers? So many similar tragedies happen in different corners of the world. What do you think is going wrong? And what systems need to change to prevent this from ever happening again? And what would you have done if you were trapped in that position? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. I really want to hear your perspectives. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. And as always, if you're still watching this, maybe you're looking for the same thing I am.